Okay, in this video, which I think is going to be one of the more popular ones, I'm going to discuss lots of ways you can use AI with students. So this isn't focused on our platform or anything like that. This is general. All of this could be used everywhere. So although we've got a student solution that is either out or coming out very soon, this is not about that. This is about general things that every school could do. I'm going to start with secondary because there's a lot more uses currently, and I'll explain why. And then I'm going to finish with some uses that are more transferable across all and primary. So to start with, we'll call it the rules of engagement. So it's making sure you all understand that most LLMs, so I'm talking things like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude, things like that, some of the big LLMs, most of them have a very clear age range where you can only use it between 13 and 18, or in some cases you can't use it below 18. So make sure you're very careful on which platform you use if you're thinking of using anything with students, because they have a very strict age range and they might potentially ask for parental consent. And again, how does your school deal with that? Is it something where you expect you send a letter home to parents? Is it something where you use your loco parentis state, which is this idea of you are their acting parent when they're at school, to give consent? Can you do that? All of these questions need answering, because you could potentially, should something go wrong, be in a lot of trouble if you've bypassed all the rules. You know, if you use one of these that are 18 plus with a younger kid and it generates something homophobic or something like that, be very, very careful. So first off, adhere to the age gates that are provided by all of the in the terms and conditions of all of these AI platforms that most people aren't reading. So check those. Then use a walled garden approach. So what I mean by that is use a platform with school provided accounts. Don't ask students to use AI on personal accounts and things like that. So use a walled garden so you can manage the tools, you can make sure they adhere to your policies and things like that. So make sure you're doing that. And again, protect personal data. So make sure you're using an AI that isn't learning from what the students are typing in. So make sure you teach the students about not entering personal information and things like that before you start letting them interact with any open AI type model where that you can ask it anything, those types. So rules of engagement out of the way. Let's assume you're happy with your solution, and then you want to think about the different use cases. So I'm going to give you some examples. So the most powerful at the moment, if you don't have a dedicated platform, is using teacher guided prompting. So this is where you can create quite nice educational experiences with the students using an AI platform of some sort, like a language model. But what usually happens to get that working well is the teacher designs these prompts, like prompt templates. You give them to the students copy and paste them into a language model, and then the activity will begin. It might be a 10 or 15 minute activity, and I'm going to talk you through some different examples. So I would class this as teacher guided prompting, which is a section I'm going to cover with some ideas. So for example, you could do the personalised revision tutor. So the concept is, after a test or assessment, students often know what they got wrong but not necessarily know how to fix it. So you could create an AI sort of personal tutor where the students can say what their weaknesses are, and it will you'll provide the prompt template, and then this will help guide the students through working on those weaknesses. So it promotes metacognition and self-directed learning. This is quite a nice personalized revision tutor example. So this is an example of the prompt you could use. So you could say something like, act as an expert GCSE history teacher. Obviously you'd amend this depending on the subject, who is encouraging and supportive. Your task is to create a personalized revision guide for a student who has just taken a test on, again, you personalize it to whatever it is, the Cold War. The student's revision guide should be based on the specific topics they found difficult. The topics the students struggled with are, and then fill in the gap. So I've done something like this. I won't read it all, you get the idea. I did something like this with a group of students where they'd done a test with another teacher, because I split the class. I teach the practical programming, and the other teacher was teaching the theory. The other teacher had done a test recently. I copied and pasted a prompt to all the students. They pasted in the gaps what their weaknesses were on the test, And the prompt was getting it to make programming activities that get increasingly more difficult linked to the areas of weakness they had on the theoretical side of the project. It was an amazing activity. Everybody was doing completely different programming projects that were linked to what they were individually weak on. It was fantastic. That's how powerful AI can be, in terms of personalizing the learning for people. And this is an example. So let's go over a couple more. So the low stakes knowledge bot. So let's say you're in a subject like a history or something like that, where or RE or something where you're going to have a classroom discussion, and that's a big part of the learning, where they hear each other's thoughts and opinions. And so you might want to do something like a low stakes knowledge bot, where at the start of the lesson for 10 minutes, the students have the experience of talking to an AI who knows a lot about that topic that you are going to be discussing. And then it's low stakes because they can ask the silly questions that they'd be uncomfortable asking in the classroom. They can all ask different questions to build their knowledge on whatever they want to talk about. And then if you do something like this for 10 minutes before going into the class discussion, you could find the engagement levels are much higher in the class discussion from people that would usually be quieter, because they feel more confident having answered some of those previous questions. And it's, like I say, the key thing here is the low stakes. So I'm not trying to say don't talk to classmates and teachers and talk to the AI instead, because that'd be horrible. It's that idea of giving it a 10-minute AI experience and then leading into that human on human experience afterwards, which is the most important. So this is like preparation work. So something as simple as this. So act as a friendly and patient expert on Shakespeare's play Macbeth. You are a knowledge bot designed to help. And then all of this you'd obviously change, fill in the gaps. Your task is to answer any questions I have about the play. When I ask a question, you must answer it clearly and simply without giving away any major spoilers that would ruin the story. You should focus on the information a student would need at the start of the play. Wait for me to ask my first question. So if you copied and pasted that into the students and they put it into a language model, as long as they didn't change it too much, except for where you've got placeholders, it would create that sort of experience for the students for 5-10 minutes, however long you want to do it, which is quite a nice educational tool. Let's go over a couple more, and then I'm going to talk about a completely different approach to this. So the debate partner. So the AI takes an opposing viewpoint on the topic, forcing the student to anticipate counter arguments and strengthen their own position. So again, just a really quick prompt. Act as a critical but fair debate opponent. Your topic is, my position is, your task is to provide 3 strong counter arguments to my position. So the student fills in the gap, and again, it just promotes more personalized experience for every student, where they're getting counter arguments specifically to whatever they put in their position part. You could do a writing assistant. I won't go through all of these, but these are just to give you some ideas. A writing assistant that after a student has written a draft, you can get it to give it certain types of feedback on that draft. So this is all examples of teacher guided prompting. So this is where we move from being gatekeepers to architects. So you can create really meaningful AI learning experiences. They're not going to cover your whole lesson. They're experiences within your lesson, but they can be really powerful and really personalized. And by doing it like this, we maintain the pedagogical control. So the big problem with LLMs is they can be really powerful, like I've just shown you now, when used in the right way. But the problem is that you're not really in control. So this is why you might want to consider getting a platform. Again, I'm not saying ours, I'm just meaning one that has a student experience solution, because that might give you an LLM style experience with a little bit more control. But the problem is, if you give people, like, say you give every student in the class a prompt like one of the ones I've just talked about, they could just so easily delete bits off it and then ask it to actually tell them the answers to things, and that's where it can be abused a little bit. But that is a great example of how some people are using it really well at the minute. Also, the big thing about, if you're going to do teacher generated stuff, which is the next section I'm going to talk about, so using AI with students doesn't just mean student facing. So it doesn't just mean the student is sat in front of the AI. It can also be you using the AI as a teacher to differentiate materials and things like that. Because if it's teacher generated content, you're sitting in between the students and the AI, which gives us safety. You've got the oversight of everything. And that also means these age restrictions have disappeared, because while there's an age restriction for a student to use AI, there's no age restriction on you differentiating a worksheet using AI for a student to use. So this is very powerful across all age ranges. So I'm not going to go over these. I'm going to give you some quite specifics, but AI is an amazing tool that can be used for pretty much anything. You know, it can be drafting things to give you more time. It can be planning. It can be marking, but you've got to be careful with marking. The big one is probably the one in the middle, the thinking partner, which I do all the time. And then the bottom left, this idea of personalising learning. As a teacher, I feel the pain of you want to differentiate materials for every kid. And it's hard enough to find the time to make a lesson, let alone differentiate the lesson. But I think AI is so powerful that I think it is almost going to become expected that you could design one worksheet and put it into an AI platform and say, make me an easy, medium and hard version of this worksheet. I'm not saying that's the best experience ever in a lesson. I'm just trying to say you could do that in like less than a minute. So however long it took you to make the worksheet, I don't think there's an excuse anymore for not having more differentiated materials than before, because that's where AI can play a big part. So a couple of examples. So you can make writing scaffolds. So you can make very specific writing scaffolds. So you can say like you are an empathetic year 6 teacher crafting resources for students who struggle with writing. So again, if you had a type of writing scaffold that you want to make, you could literally include that as an example and it would make a very similar style writing. So they can all be very, very similar, but you can make scaffolds for any piece of work, or you could make a piece of work where you reduce the scaffolding. So you could have like, I don't know, 10 questions where the first question is heavily scaffolded and then they're slowly reduced. So the student starts becoming more independent as they work for activities. So it's just ideas. So obviously bringing work to life with images is quite cool. So this is, I'm thinking more primary. I'm thinking, trying to engage boys more into writing. I'm not trying to be sexist. I just know that can be a problem. So you could say, for example, if you did some descriptive writing activities around generating characters, you could get the AI to generate an image of the character based on the description the students wrote. And then the end part of their descriptive writing is they get a big picture of the character they've made, which is quite cool, relatively easy to do. So again, you put a description into an AI image generator and you've brought their writing to life, which I'm sure would go down really well. You could make a book cover for a short story that students wrote. So if you do some writing, you could get AI to design a book cover, make the book cover with an image generator, and you could potentially make like a digital library of all the students writing. So they could, maybe click on and read each other's books and things like that, which would be quite cool. Or visually put the book covers on the wall with the paragraph underneath or something like that. So I've done this in my prompt engineering training video, so I won't spend ages on this, but it's just making sure you understand that a good prompt, whether you're asking it to make an image, whether you're designing a prompt for to use in a lesson with the older kids, it's making sure you've got trade in there. So trade is the analogy I like the most, because I think it in my opinion covers the main key ones. So you've got a task, be very clear what you want the AI to do, give it a role. You are a sympathetic English teacher, whatever it might be. Say who it's for, year 10 students, year 3 students, whatever. Make sure you give it enough details. And last one, make sure you give it an example. So if you're generating things like scaffolding sheets, what is a good scaffolding sheet? The best way to tell it is give it an example of a scaffolded worksheet that you've made and you really like, and therefore you're going to be happier with the output. So that's everything for using AI with students for now. Obviously, like I say, there are platforms like ours that have student experiences built in that makes it a bit easier to do these things, but a lot of these things can be done with the tools you've already got. If you can't afford a dedicated platform as a school, I don't think it means you can't engage with the AI to its advantage for you and your students already. So hopefully you found that useful again, and please check out the other videos. Thank you.